Feldman Family Educational Institute, and the Wallace Company's Mobile on the Run, who have made this performance possible. Our second event is our community-wide Holocaust commemoration, Yom HaShoah, to be held at Sheremet on Sunday, May the 5th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The program entitled Why We Speak will feature testimonies from our local Holocaust survivors. I hope you'll join us for both of these very special upcoming programs. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our program for today. I've been a docent at the Holocaust Museum for over 17 years, and I have had the honor to hear Mendel Rosenberg's story on several occasions. I have admired Mendel for all these years. He has demonstrated a real desire to survive what befell him during the Holocaust. It has been an absolute privilege and honor to work with Mendel. And now, I'd like to ask Jerry Schlichter in a minute to come up to the podium to give some remarks. Jerry has made Mendel's book and today's event possible. Jerry Schlichter is a lawyer and founder of the firm Schlichter, Bogard, and Denton. He has long been deeply interested in the Holocaust and the experiences of people in World War II. He believes that it is important to hear firsthand of what happened in order to understand what happened and why. He regularly meets with World War II veterans in their 90s to talk about their experiences and has met with Holocaust survivors in St. Louis and at the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Jerry met Mendel Rosenberg in the Holocaust film series here and wanted to learn more about his experiences. So he asked Berta Meyer if she would take Mendel to have a get-together lunch at lunch. And he'll tell you how out of that came Mendel's book. Jerry?
Thank you, Fran, and it's great to see the turnout and interest in Mendel's story, which he'll tell you about, and which is truly remarkable and so representative of what so many people who didn't survive experienced. So Mendel and I met first at his film series, which actually is at 1 o'clock this afternoon, another one of the films on the Holocaust. And then, as Fran said, we met again in D.C. at the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And I wanted to learn more details of Mendel's story because he and other survivors have such a remarkable story of living through this unfathomable, horrific action taken by a country that was one of the most educated countries, if not the most educated countries, certainly in Europe and in the world, and to help people try to understand how that could actually come about anywhere. So I asked Berta Meyer if she could arrange a lunch for us to talk about your experiences, Mendel, and for me to learn more, which she kindly did. And thank you, Berta, for doing that, because without that, we probably wouldn't be here. So Mendel told his story to me as he's told orally to people, and I asked him, Mendel, have you ever thought about putting this in writing? He said, well, I don't think I really could do that, and besides that, who'd be interested in this story? I said, Mendel, I think a lot of people would be interested in the story if you could get it in writing. Because it's so, while everyone's experience is unique, it's so representative of what so many people went through to try to survive in such a difficult world. And it also is a learning opportunity for people to try to figure out what they might learn from it. So what I did is it's also a remarkable story of human survival and determination to survive that Mendel will talk about, and without which we wouldn't be here. So what we did is I asked Dick Weiss, who's here today, to come in and to help Mendel put his story into writing. and bringing in Dick made this all happen. Dick, we appreciate what you did so much, and the work product is terrific. So, and the book is the outcome. So, speaking of whether people would be interested or not, so this past week, Mendel was on KMOX radio on the Charlie Brennan Show. He was on the leading AM station. He was on public radio, KWMU, telling his story. And in today's paper, which Mendel has here, I see his story is the front page article in the Arts and Education section. So there's and all of that plus the turnout here today, both in this room and in the adjoining room where we had to have spillover, shows Mendel, without any doubt, people are interested in your story. You can count on that, and I'm happy to have been a part of it. Thank you.
I'm Jean Cavender, and I'm the director of the Holocaust Museum and Learning Center, and we couldn't be more pleased with the result of today's in terms of attendance. And let me just ask you this quickly. First of all, how many have a seat next to them? If they would raise their hand, if anyone wants to, so we could fill that in. And then my second question is, for how many of you, is this the first time you've been to the Holocaust Museum and Learning Center? If you would raise your hand. You are my audience. Seriously, we hope you will come back and experience not only the museum, which you can do today, but we have a lot of programs. But now that you know we exist, we look forward to seeing your face more often. I want to recognize a few people in the audience. Is Jerry Greiman here he's the Jewish Federation Board Chair. Thanks, Jerry. And I also want to recognize Rachel Miller, who is also a Holocaust survivor, who's in the audience. Rachel, will you stand? And I saw Sig Adler as well. Sig, will you stand? Where is Sig? And I don't know if Wally Mayer is here. Wally, stand, please. Wally and Rachel and Sig and Mendel are probably the first eyewitnesses to the Holocaust, and they speak for us pretty regularly. And we are honored to have them here today. So before I begin, today you'll have a rare opportunity and hear from a true eyewitness about the tragedy of the Holocaust. I've had the pleasure of working with Mendel for the past 15 years. He has shown tremendous dedication to the work that he does with our museum. His wife, Sandy, once shared with me that for years Mendel suffered from nightmares, reliving the Holocaust, the past of the Holocaust while sleeping. She was extremely grateful when Mendel started speaking for the museum because it seemed like the nightmares abated once he was able to talk openly about his experience. He is a remarkable man who will go to great lengths to deliver the lessons of the Holocaust. He, like other survivors, believed it is his duty to speak for those whose voices were silenced. He has spoken to thousands of people over the years, and Mendel is a hero in the truest sense of the word. Dick, I have to tell you, I'm sorry, I forgot. I don't have your intro sitting in front of me, so can you do your own intro?
I'm a man who needs no introduction.
You want to talk about yourself for a bit?
Well, I make paragraphs for a living. I worked at the Post-Dispatch for 30 years and left in 2005 and went into business for myself. called my company, modestly called my company, Weiss Wright LLC. And I do a lot of work in the community on social justice issues. Those are my favorite things to do. And I was just so honored and thrilled when Jerry called me and asked me if I would do this work.
Great. Thank you, Mel. Thank you so much. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to ask a few questions, and the two of them are going to talk about the process and what happened for them during writing of Mendel's memoirs. So I'm going to start with Mendel. Nearly 3 decades passed since you were freed from the Nazis before you spoke publicly about your experience. In fact, you rarely spoke about it with your family. What made you decide to begin bearing witness?
What do you want me to talk about?
I knew this wasn't going to be easy.
When it comes to talking and discussing something that happened to me, it took me a long while till I got it out from the inside. Most of the talking and the writing came from them. Those two have done most of the work on it. I started to write and I wrote 3 pages and I had to throw it away because they didn't sound right. When they didn't sound right, I decided I'd take a professional to put it together. And here is my professional sitting right next to me.
Mendel, hold the microphone closer. It's a little hard to hear.
You got hard to hearing? They don't have hard to hearing.
They're getting signals, Mendel.
Oh, okay. Hard
Yeah, much
speak
better.
more closely. I didn't anticipate it to present anything. I was sitting here and I told them, I'll answer any questions you want, but for me to stand up and speak, forget it.
So for many years, you spoke to young people at schools, and when the Holocaust Museum and Learning Center opened, so you did this before we opened, you spoke to groups of all ages, including adults. Later, you and Sandy sponsored a Holocaust film series, which is actually happening at 1 o'clock today. You also did several oral interviews with Holocaust historians, but it was only in the past year that you put words to a page. Why now? Why does having your experience in a book, what does having your experience in a book mean to you?
The experience in a book, I was approached and they asked me if I would write some of what exactly happened to me. I myself was not much good in writing. However, I have a gentleman who was sitting next to me and he did a wonderful job in putting the book together. And I signed about 200 copies of the book. Do they have any left over?
We do not.
There's more where that came from.
Yes.
Oh, okay, there is more where that came from. When are they going to be available? I don't know. All I know is that I tried to do the best that I knew how. And I can see it turned out a very nice group of young people here that wanted to hear more about the Holocaust and more about the experience that I had.
Dick, what has been your experience in terms of your family and the Holocaust? And how did you begin your work with Mendel in building this book?
Well, I want to say a couple of things before we get to that. One is that I wanted to recognize David Lejessen and Laura Stanton, who you'll see how beautifully laid out this book is, and also edited. They were involved in that. David and Laura, would you stand up? They're with Levitico. Work very closely with us. Yeah, so Levitico for all your design and publishing needs. And the other thing is, I learned a lot from Mendel, but I also, including fashion and I also want to give Mendel this because he's a star now, and you're going to get hit up by the paparazzi. Your grandson, the way he does it is he puts the that way too. So there's that sight gags at a Holocaust event. I think that might be a first. So in many ways, I'm uniquely unqualified to do this story because my family, I had the opposite experience. My family came over on both sides in the 1890s. One thing we did have in common is that my grandma was from Lithuania. Mendel is from there, so that was good. And I learned about the Holocaust when my dad sat me down with a book that Joseph Pulitzer had put together, and he had been over after the war and documented what he found at the camps. And I was probably 13 years old. So I'm 13 years old in the mid-60s, something like that, and Mendel is just really getting going here. What were you in St. Louis?
I was also 13 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Of course, I was going to University City schools, and all I had to do to get through the day was just to show up and study hard, which I didn't do. And so that was the experience I came to. And I sit with Mendel and I listen to his story, and the one thing that I appreciated about Mendel, and you'll notice this already, he's a very understated guy. He's very modest. And when we did the book together, I wanted it to be understated. He doesn't like, I don't like when I do writing workshops and I tell people don't use exclamation points. And I don't think you'll ever hear Mendel speak with an exclamation point.
No, I wouldn't speak. Is right. Because there's so many people that do the job so much better than I do. I let them do the speaking for me.
So you also need to know that I'm actually a very unsuccessful ghostwriter. One of the last ones I did, a book, we did a ceremony or a signing, book signing. It may have had something to do with the fact that we did it at Bellefontaine Cemetery, not a great venue. It was raining cats and dogs, and 3 people showed up. 1 was my wife, and 2 were some people who out-of-town friends. And now here I am in tall cotton with the sellout. So anything I do going forward, I am going to call a Mendel Rosenberg production. And we'll go from there. But what I did with Mendel, what I tried to do was there were so many oral histories, so I listened to that, and then there would be something he would talk about his hometown. I would try to learn a lot about that hometown and build details around and give you a sense of place. What was pronounce your hometown's name? It's impossible.
Surely.
Yeah, Scholler. And I can't spell, I spelled it 12 different ways in the text. Hopefully we caught all the typos and got it right. So I would do that and try to put pictures in people's heads. And when the first camp that he was sent to was Stutthof, and so I tried to learn as much about Stutthof as possible. He had his account, he remembers what happened, but then I could build paragraphs around what was going on at the time. Why was that camp there? What was the history of the camp? How did they bring people in and deal with them? And so that was what I essentially did as we moved along. And I just kept getting to know Mendel better, and I began to think the way he thought, believe it or not, and to express things in the way he would say them. And then I'd run it by him, and he'd say, that doesn't sound like me, don't say that. Or, you got it wrong. And we went back and forth that way.
We did a long way together. And I couldn't express enough of what happened to me so somebody else would understand. There was no way that people can understand what we went through in the concentration camp. If I tell them I didn't eat for 4 years, I have no way expressing it and no way of saying how I went on for 4 years without eating enough food. Grant you, I weighed only 60 pounds when I was liberated, but that was after already. After we were liberated, it was already easy to talk about it.
So Mendel, you described how your life in the 1930s in Lithuania was almost idyllic. In what ways?
Life in the 30s at the beginning was the same as life in the United States. We lived the same type of a life then as we live here today. I tried to express myself the best way I could in the book, and I think he done a wonderful job in representing some of the questions. And I was hoping that people would understand what happened to us for the last 4 years, from 1939 till 1945.
So Mendel, when did you begin to realize that everything was going to change?
I didn't try to realize that on my own. I tried to express as much as I could to the young kids and telling them what can happen. And if they would get together and try not to make sure that something like this would happen again. My main reason in talking to those people, particularly to the young people, is the simple fact that I was hoping that what I represent would never happen again. That we would be able to live together and like human beings instead of like animals. And I don't know, I hope it turned out okay, and I hope that everybody else understood that.
I think the thing that impressed me a lot was how idyllic Mendel's life was and how I can just turn on a dime so quickly, and it is really a lesson for today. There's a lot of things going on in this country that echo what was going on in the 1930s in Lithuania, and it's just a cautionary tale.
So Mendel, before the war, you and your family could look to the future with a great deal of optimism. Your parents looked forward to emigrating to Palestine. Then World War II changed everything. You lost your father, your brother, and your mother were sent to concentration camps. What were you thinking about your future then?
There isn't much you could think about then. Then you were only thinking day to day how to survive, how not to starve to death, how we could approach step after step. We used to eat almost anything we could find, like we could eat it. I don't know if anyone in the United States had the opportunity to eat raw food. In other words, food that was not cooked. If we could find a cat, a dog, a rat, a snake, anything, we could kill them, but we had no opportunity to cook them. So we eat them raw. It didn't sit very good with the stomach. It was not a good thing to do, is to eat raw food. However, when we have no opportunity to eat anything else, and we did not have an opportunity how to handle it except by eating it raw, We had no opportunity. I grant you, the food, it was something to fill your stomach with. And that's what happened to me.
Mendel, your brother died just before the end of the war. How did you learn about his death?
He didn't die. He was killed right at the end of the war. There's a difference if you die from natural sources and where you get killed on. The capo, the foreman, told him how to do, and he didn't do something fast enough. He was beaten to death. To me, that is a killing. That is not a dying. Grant you, a lot of the people all around me were dying day in and day out. We've seen them not to come to an end. And that's what happened. In February 1945, we were looking forward to being liberated soon. But that didn't happen to him. He was killed by a capo, and I didn't know about it till after the war.
How did you deal with that emotionally?
Talk about emotion. We talk about dealing with it emotionally. I didn't know what some of the things what you guys call it emotional had to be. I don't know how many of you old people have ever been in a concentration camp or ever been close to a concentration camp. It was like we were all treated like a bunch of animals. Every day from morning to night, we were treated like animals, and we were trying to stay alive. That's the only thing we tried to do.
So what was it like on the day that the Allied forces rescued you and others near Dachau?
When the Americans came to Dachau, and they opened up the railroad cars and let us out, better than half of the people in the railroad car didn't make it. We didn't look. We only tried to stay alive as long as we possibly could, and that's it. The ones that stood alive, lived through all this, managed to stay alive, survived, and the rest of them gave themselves up. A lot of them gave themselves up without a fight. We used to call in the morning an appel or a head count. And every day we used to hear how much 500 people, 200 people have been able to come out to work. The rest of them, people were in such a position that they couldn't. I don't know, I'm not a very good speaker either. I thought I could express myself, but I can't even express myself. I think the way the book is written is the best way for me to express myself in regards to the living and dying.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's well said. Tell us about the day you were reunited with your mother.
To be united to the mother was a thing all by itself. And the reason it was a thing all for itself is because I waited too long till I saw her finally. In the beginning of 1942, in the beginning of 1943, I heard that there are women also available. By the time 1944 came along, I was hoping that my mother would be also in the survival. As it turned out, when I finally heard from her in 1945, was the simple reason that she survived, and that was just a happy point in life, is that she survived. Grant you, it took her better than a year to come to me, But when we saw each other, we could only talk about the future. We can't talk about the past. The past was that we were the only two of our family survivors. And the rest of the people were all dead. And the only place we could go to the United States, that's the only place we had relatives. And that's what happened. We wrote to them and they made arrangements for us to come to the United States. And we came to Youngstown, Ohio.
So by this time, you knew 4 languages, but very little English.
5 languages.
Sorry, 5 languages. 5 languages. That's your problem there. Very little English. How did you manage in those early days?
The funny part of it, when I came to the United States with 5 languages, English wasn't one of them. And when I was speaking anything in any other language, they were all converting to English. There were a lot of people that tried to help. And every day that I went to work, there were people at work on the job that were trying to help me with English. Grant you, if you speak a language in a country that every day it goes around you, you talk about that language, it's much easier to understand than when you come to to speak only another language. But I learned how to speak English, and it didn't take long. I got a diploma graduation from special high school in Youngstown, Ohio.
Mendel, let's name those languages. What languages do you know?
Beside Russian and German, Lithuanian and Hebrew and Yiddish.
And when you got drafted into the military, where did they send you?
Oh, I'll tell them that I can speak fluently Russian and German. I can read and write it. I thought for sure they'll send me to Europe. I didn't get to go to Europe. After I graduated, I went to military intelligence school. And when military intelligence school, I became an MP. And I was guarding a stockade in the United States.
And then where did they send you after that?
After that, they sent me, when I volunteered to go to Europe, they sent me to Japan.
So Mendel, you built a business in St. Louis from scratch. What was
I wouldn't
it?
say scratch. It was a business.
Okay, you built a business. What was it in your background, your upbringing, and your Holocaust experience that gave you the gumption to be an entrepreneur?
Well, for 20 years, I worked for somebody else, and then I got fired. When I was out of a job, I was thinking, for 20 years, I'm good for somebody else. I must be good for myself, too. So I started my own company. Grant you, the first 3 years were very, very difficult. However, I stuck out, and not so. I stuck out. The bank stuck out with $110,000 that I owed them. And they finally, in 1971, finally turned around my way. And I was able to pay off the bank.
Okay, what was your philosophy behind the way you treated and regarded your workers?
Who had a philosophy? I didn't have a philosophy. I just went and done the same thing with all the employees as I would have liked to be done myself. And the way they treated me, I treated everybody else. And the best thing was, treat somebody else the way you want to be treated. And that will help you if you want to be in business.
Talk about how you would like to be remembered. What is the example you want to set for future generations?
I don't think I'm going to live that long. Second generation, I don't know about second generation. I'm still working on this generation before I could get to the second generation. I'm working from day to day, And day to day, I only think what I can do myself and for myself in the future. And I was able to do almost anything and express myself the same way I would express about you, or you. It was very easy to do that. And I finally got it done, and it turned out to be very good. Because if you do on somebody else like you want to be done to yourself, you'll succeed very well.
All right, so those are my questions. I'm checking to see if anybody else in the audience has questions.
Now, normally the questions in the audience, there aren't any questions.
Got one right here.
Oh, a lawyer always has to.
Having had been brought up in the United States in the 1950s predominantly, we were all concerned that we wanted to be known as Americans, not as Jews. And we're seeing a little bit more of that double question being raised today as far as our dual loyalty. But knowing many Holocaust survivors who would not talk about their experience, it seemed that there was a change after the '67 war, where Israel was established and people here spoke kindly about Israel. Can you tell us if that had any impact upon you?
What?
Exactly. In other words, what did you feel any different to the '67 war?
No.
Okay. Did you speak before the '67 war?
Yes.
Okay.
The only problem that I had is I couldn't speak right away because for 30 years I used to have the same nightmares by day. It was a nightmare, and I had all kind of dreams about it. How the Germans were trying to shoot me, and I was trying to disappear, trying to run away, and get away from it. After that, I kind of quieted down, and I was able to speak to the younger people better than to the older people, because the questions they would have was similar to the questions what you have. And since you're a lawyer, I presume you know all our answers.
And I know when you speak to a lawyer, you keep your answers brief.
Okay, I kept my answers brief, very brief. I told the lawyer that time will come when I'll be able to express myself and tell you day to day what's happening to me.
Just a question. I was with you at Yom HaShoah in Israel in 2008 when they delivered to you the answer to what happened to your father. What impact did that have on you?
Well,
By the way, it was
finally,
in a film.
finally, I had an opportunity to know what's happening to other people that time of the year when I was incarcerated. And I did not try to speak on what happened to me. Israel, I took it for granted. Grant you. Israel, every Jew was taking Israel for granted. At least that's the way I look at it. Now I see that young man over there has a question.
Where?
Right over there, right to your left.
Who has a question?
He gave you a piece of paper to look at.
Oh, no, that was Kent. He was going to go. Kent wanted to offer, if anyone wanted to go on a tour after this event, Kent is available to do the tour.
Up here. Up there.
Hi, Mendel.
Hi.
I was really taken by your description that life before the concentration camp was lovely, like it is here, and that things can change very, very fast. Could you talk a little bit about how much we should be worried right now?
If you should not help the skinheads and some other ones that are thinking that they're out there more as an individuals, they have a better program than the President of the United States. I didn't think so. I thought that the President of the United States was doing a fairly good job.
If I might add something here, in some ways my favorite part of Mendel's story is this second half of his life, and that's why we called it Thriver and not Survivor. And what it's really about is citizenship. Mendel came over and he participated fully in being what it is to be an American. He not only served in the military, he built a business, he joined business organizations and led them, and he was president of his congregation. He is totally exemplary. In that respect.
I was small business person of the year.
That too, and you were in the White House.
Oh,
You were
yes.
invited to the White House.
Yes. Also to the state capitol, also.
And so that, I think, is really a strong message that comes out of Mendel's life, is that everybody needs to participate as a citizen.
Matter of fact is I encourage the kids that are high school kids, particularly when they are 18 years old, I told them they have to go and vote. They have to vote. It doesn't make a difference who they vote for or what they vote for, but they have to go and vote, because this is a privilege that you only get in the United States. I remember being in Europe, I didn't have the privilege of voting over there. I voted in the United States, and I told them that that is the most important thing that they can do.
I was wondering a little bit more about how you reconnected with your mom, how you both found each other, and then where you both were living when you reconnected.
That's a good question. I don't know which connection she's trying to find out about. The connection with my mother was very simple. We saw each other, we didn't talk about the past, we talked about the future only, and she told me that we have relatives in the United States and we should come to the United States, spend the time with a relative, and that's what happened.
What you may be getting at a little bit is, well, how does somebody coming out of a concentration camp in Eastern Europe get to gather with her son, who's in a concentration camp, or was in Western Europe, and somehow the word got passed
Yes.
that your mother was still alive, and she said, stay where you are, I will come to you. And she had to essentially, because of the way things were set up in Eastern Europe, bribe her way with what little money she was able to have, to bribe her way through various checkpoints to get there. It took a year, more than a year, for that to unfold.
Okay, we have time for two more questions. Someone raise their hand.
comment up here, Miss.
Sure.
I did want to make a comment about the effects of liberation of DACA. My father-in-law was in the first company of the 42nd Infantry Division that liberated DACA. And it never left him, ever. But the effect of him until the day he died. So we appreciate what you went through.
Thank you for talking about it.
Okay, our last question.
I would like to know how you dealt with any feelings of hatred and vengeance.
That's a good question. Except I didn't think about vengeance. I didn't think about speaking of what happened. I just wanted to be left alone and start a new life again since I came to the United States. And when I saw life in the United States, I kind of felt like I'm part of it. Because the life in the United States was so good, just like in the 30s before the war started.
I think the best response is this family sitting around. Would you all stand?
I happen to have a girl and a boy, and they got married, and they ended up with 7 grandchildren. And the only thing that I accomplished with them was I asked them if they want higher education, and all 7 of them accepted and went for higher education because I told them I'll take care of financially, make sure that they do.
Mendel, thank you, Dick. Mendel, you are a hero in the true sense of the word.
No.
I know you say that, but
No,
you are.
that's not true.
It's true. And I want to let people know, for those of you, we didn't have enough books for everyone today, but I think the books will be available on Amazon.com, and you can actually order it yourself. But we don't. What's the price point? Do we know?
$9.95.
$9.95. It's such a deal. So anyway, I appreciate all of you for being here today. I know Mendel and Dick do. This has been an incredible experience. And thank you, Jerry and Sue. You put together a great program for us, and we were able to showcase one of our longtime survivors who's been in this community. Thank you again. I hope you'll join us for a little nosh. We have a light brunch in the boardroom. And thank you for coming today. Okay, Mendel has something to say. Say only one thing.
To say, I don't speak as well as some of the rabbis that are here. I try only to say is the way I feel about it. And the way I feel about it, I feel like I've accomplished something. I've accomplished something with my children and my grandchildren. And I thank them from the bottom of my heart.